writing right this time. Hey, I am Dr. Deb. Welcome to this podcast. And today's topic is all about meddling moms, how to deal with toxic in-laws. So I want you to kind of think about what makes them toxic. And something I just love is if you want to chat in, I'm turning on live chat. You certainly may, and I will be happy to hear from you. What makes them toxic? What does toxic really mean? So let's go through a few examples. Not examples from real life. The problem is I know too many people with toxic in-laws, and any example I would give is going to give away who they are, and I can't do that. So every example is highly unusual and characteristic of those particular people. But in general, it means asking personal questions of the children. And the children don't have to be little kids. They don't have to be 19-year-olds that just got married. They could be 45-year-olds that have been married for 25 years. And for whatever reason, and we'll get to that reason too, for whatever reason, the in-laws think that it's okay to ask personal questions, whether it's about money, sex, activities, jobs. There's just no boundaries. And what's more, they often think it's out of love, or at least they convey that to their children. Another example is actual abuse, criticizing, blaming, putting down, disregarding whatever the person says, like pretending they're not even there, just overlooking them because they have nothing to add, giving unwanted advice. Well, you know what you really should do is this and that. And I'm guilty of it, and I hope I'm not toxic, but I'll say to at least one of my children sometimes, well, why don't you try this with the kids? Because if I get a complaint that the kids are wild, so I feel called upon to offer it. The difference is, and sometimes you just can't help give advice. You've lived your life, right? You have some years behind you. You feel like you can offer something. The difference is I put a question mark. Will that work for you? What do you think? And then I leave it go. And I don't repeat it every other day. I don't repeat it every month either. It's something that maybe will come up once in a year because I feel called upon to do it. But some in-laws will give constant advice, either to their own child or to their in-law child. And any one of these things is highly disrespectful. You could call it abuse. Sometimes also there's a competition for the child of that person against the in-law child. So there are many different ways of experiencing this toxicity. So now the question is, why? Why do they do this? What are they getting out of it? So one of the things that I have heard numerous times is that they seem to be mean. They seem to be gaslighting. They seem to be manipulative. They seem to be just horrible people. Well, I don't agree that that's what it is. I think the cause is really simple. They live that way themselves, period. I think the cause is pretty much they live that way themselves. There's a second thing that I will come up with, but let me just take a few minutes on this point. Every single one of the toxic in-laws that I've heard about When I get the full story, I discover that these people had a rough childhood themselves. That is, the so-called, I mean, I hate to do this to you because now instead of being angry at your toxic in-laws, you're going to feel sorry for them, but that's really human, isn't it? Every one of the cases that I have heard about has a situation with that so-called toxic person or people having suffered terribly themselves. So, for an example, I just heard a case today. Somebody said she yells all the time. But then again, look what she went through. Maybe you and I would yell too if we went through that, which was very a kind way of looking at this person. But not that I say it's okay to yell, and not that I say no matter what you went through, if it was bad, you could yell. I do think there's a way out. We'll get to that. But the point I'm making is that what I consider trauma has been in the family history of the so-called toxic in-law. And if you look deep enough and you ask the right questions, if you can, you learn all about it. So the person suddenly becomes human, a person with a sack on his back or her back. They're carrying a burden, and it would be so nice to let it down. But they can't. They don't know how. So they keep carrying it and distributing the goodies out of it to everyone around them, unfortunately. There is a second reason, which is I don't like to get into the world of labeling people, but the second reason is really unhealthy, super unhealthy. And that is because the parent has an unhealthy attachment relationship to their child, that they somehow feel they need to hold on to their child for themselves. Again, if you look into this person's history, you will find they were mistreated too. They had an unhealthy relationship with the persons that were supposed to love and care for them as they were growing up, and it didn't stop once they grew up, which is why the in-laws themselves don't stop once you grew up. So this toxic relationship is intergenerational. What Dr. Schwartz of IFS calls a legacy burden. It's something really that does not have to be transmitted to the next generation because each person really inherits it without wanting to, without even understanding it. So now I've kind of outlined what the problem is. What do you do about it? How do you get this burden from burdening you and totally marring and ruining your life? Let me begin by saying, here's what you should not do, okay? And I'll tell you why. Don't explain. Don't sit down with your in-law and say to them in the nicest way possible, you know, Mom, you know, Dad, when you inquire personal things of us, like how much money we're putting into our savings account or how sex was between us, we really are uncomfortable with those questions. And we really don't want you to do that anymore. Don't do that. Don't do that. No matter how nice you are, it is going to backfire. It will not work. Why? They say the proof is in the pudding. Why? The very fact that they can behave this way without for 1 second stopping to think that it's wrong proves they don't understand that it's wrong. They don't have a clue that it's wrong. So if they don't have a clue that it's wrong and you tell them, do you think that's going to register? Who are you to tell me? I've lived my life. Who are you to tell me what's wrong? It will not register. In other words, we all make the most fundamental incorrect assumption about other people, which is we think they think like we do. They don't. They don't think like we do. They don't feel like we do. And what's obvious to us is not obvious to them. So you can't explain anything. And by the way, I've had a lot of clients wanting me to give them tips, and I did a whole other podcast on that. The reason I don't give tips is just this exact reason. It's going to fall on deaf ears. My experience and how I see life and what I draw from it as a way to live is not going to work for someone else necessarily. Maybe 1 in 100. It's not going to work for you because you're not me. So there's no reason to assume different for you and your in-laws. You see something is obviously wrong and they don't. Just to give an extreme case of an example, I was reading a rather chilling article in one of the therapy magazines that comes to me. Sometimes these things are unwanted, but they come anyway. And this was an example. And the article was about working with pedophiliacs, if I said that word right. People who commit rape and abuse sexually on children. And, I wouldn't want to work with them. One of the challenges that people have working with them is helping that person see that what they did was wrong. They don't see it. Now, you're going to say, how could they not see it? I don't know. Maybe their mother was a prostitute and there were a stream of strangers in and out of the door. Who knows? I'm not going to go there because that's not tonight's topic. But it makes the point that what you and I see as right and wrong is not what other people necessarily do. So you cannot sit and explain your feelings. You cannot explain even simple don't do this and don't do that. Because if they don't get that it's disturbing to you, they're not going to remember and they're not going to buy into it. Unfortunately, they can't even hear you say, I don't want it. Well, who are you? In my day, we listened and we did what we were supposed to, blah, blah, whatever. It's not going to work. So don't try. Okay, so now we get to the hard part. And this is probably the hardest part of all. What to do? How to handle these people? Be nice. Be kind. Include them. Make them feel special. Not people who are sexually abusing your family or beating your family or stealing from your family. I'm not talking about criminals. I'm talking about merely difficult people. People who don't necessarily seem to have a heart. And the reason I'm giving you this advice is because it could go one of two ways. It could work or not work. And it's just a 50-50 split. Flip a coin. For some people, this will work to win over them feeling less adversarial to you, to feeling less threatened by you. Now you're going to say, why should they be threatened by me? Well, let's take a case of a parent who has an abnormal attachment to their child, which is your spouse. They are going to be threatened by you because you took their spouse, their child away from you, from them. See, these are things that come up in therapy as sounding very odd. It doesn't necessarily make sense. But given that person's history and whatever trauma they went through, it can make sense. It can make sense. So if you're nice and kind, you may relax them so that they're not continuing to be adversarial to you. It may not work. I can't guarantee that it'll work. But we got some more solutions. You have to treat yourself in a different way. Up till now, you have been, if you're hurt by your in-laws, you have been making an assumption in your mind, which is an incorrect assumption. They are like me. Therefore, if they're treating me this way, they're trying to hurt me and they're succeeding. It hurts. And I don't like it. The problem is that your assumption was wrong. They're nothing like you. They don't think like you. They don't feel like you. They don't have needs that you have. Everything is different. They see the world differently than you do. Therefore, whatever it is they're doing has no meaning and should have no meaning whatsoever to you, even when they're trying to injure you. You tell yourself, it's not me, it's them. It's them. It's not me. You know, there's a certain signal with your hands that goes like this that has become a like sign, starting with Facebook, and it's all over. But I understand there are parts of this world where that symbol means something dirty. This is the same thing. The meaning of their actions should not translate to you as they're trying to hurt me. Whatever it is they're trying to do, maybe they are trying to hurt you consciously. I doubt it, but consciously, maybe they are. Doesn't matter. They're coming from a world in which they see you or their own child as the enemy, or as someone stupid who needs to be explained to, or someone beneath their even a grain of respect so they can put you down or them down. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is that they see, it's distorted. It's a different language. They see you incorrectly. They don't know you. What's more, they're not capable of knowing you. What's more, even if they were capable, they'd first have to know themselves, and they don't want to go there, truly. People like this don't know themselves, don't want to look at themselves, and are scared to death of it. Like the sign that we think means good and does not mean good in other parts of this universe, so too, whatever they mean has gotten distorted through their own perceptions, and whatever you're putting out has gotten distorted as they're seeing you. They don't know you. So whatever they're doing to you means nothing. It should mean nothing. And therefore, you can be sweet and kind and pleasant and friendly and totally ignore what they say. Not even paying attention. Pretend you are, but it goes in one ear and out the other. You can also do more. You can say, thank God I didn't go through what they went through that made them turn out this way. And if you don't want to go that far, thank God I'm better than they are. I'm not that bad. Any way you do this is meant to make you aware of the difference between who you are and who they think you are and how they treat you. Because their treatment of you is totally through a filter that distorts everything. The most important thing you can do here is not get hurt, not take it personally, because there's no connection between you. There is nothing personal. If they knew you, it would be personal. You know, when my husband was very close to his death, he was suffering from something called frontal temporal dementia. He knew what day and time it was. He knew who he was. He knew where we lived. All the things that Alzheimer's patients lose track of, no problem. So even though I'm a therapist, I was in denial at how very sick he was. And he said hurtful things to me that he had never said in all our years of marriage. And I took it personal. But think about it. If you follow the formula that I'm giving you, that it's not personal because there is no connection, there really was no connection between us at that point because he wasn't there. Everything was distorted by him. Everything. His mind was gone. Yes, he knew what day and time it was. Big deal. The more subtle emotional things that are the most important was gone. So there really was no connection. So if there's no connection, there's no reason to be hurt. I hope you're getting this because I think it's important. In fact, the measure of whether you ever should be hurt by someone is what kind of a connection do we really have? Not what kind of a connection do I think we have, but what kind of a connection do we really have? Meaning, does he know me inside and out? Do I know her inside and out? Do I even know myself inside and out? When you truly get another person and they truly get you, then you have a connection. That's called intimacy. When you have intimacy, that kind of connection, and they say something hurtful, then you have a reason to be hurt because you have a connection and they violated it. And then you could sit down and have a conversation about what happened and why it hurt you. And guess what? They'll get it. Why will they get it? Because you had a connection. How did you have a connection? How do you know you had a connection? Because they know you inside and out and you know them inside and out. Until such time as you know each other inside and out, you don't have a connection. Anything else is superficial, false. Oh, we're polite. We say hello. How are you? That's not a connection. It feels good. I mean, when I go to the grocery store, I'll say to the checkout person, hey, how was your day? Why not? Make them feel good. That can make me feel good. Very nice. It's not a connection. It is. It's on a thread. It's hanging by a thread, a connection like that. How thick is the thread, really? Right? The more intimacy in the relationship, the stronger the connection, the more you have a right to be hurt if they pull a surprise on you. But if they don't really know you and they're seeing you through a total distorted lens, there's no reason to be hurt. Just be kind to yourself. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody is typing and I didn't see it. Thank you, Dr. Deb, with your insights and inspiration. So the key is to not allow yourself to get hurt. Thank you for that essential point. There's no reason to be hurt. I'll give you a personal example from my life, too. I had a person who I thought was a friend, a girlfriend, a woman friend. And she said something very hurtful to me, and I was hurt by it. I'm trying to remember what it even was. It was quite a few years ago, and it was political in nature. She wanted to know what my take was on a certain political policy that was going into effect or being voted on or something like that, and I didn't want to discuss it. She made me finally, come on, come on, come on. I finally told her, and she said something very unkind. I think she said, you don't have compassion. And it's funny, I was emailing another friend, and I don't know why in this other conversation, she happened to say to me, you're one of the more compassionate people I know. It was just funny. So what's the story? I was hurt with that person. Why was I hurt? I was hurt because I thought we had a connection. That was my misreading how well she knows me. Because I know I'm compassionate. I'm not bragging. It's just part of who I am. And she didn't get that I am. And she was hinging this whole thing on a political view that I had a reason for. See? So I got hurt, but after thinking about it, I realized she can't be a friend. She isn't. She doesn't get me. And we knew each other several years at that point. I don't know, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. I don't know. I don't remember. But it was a number. She really didn't get me. And maybe she didn't want to. Maybe she didn't have the capacity to. Maybe we were just too different and not a fit for each other as friends. Could be. It happens. I got over it. So I love comments. All right, you guys. Have a great weekend. Take care. So glad you're on.